Hi, and welcome to this week's Maternity and Midwifery Hour. My name's Sue MacDonald, and I'm the curator for the Maternity and Midwifery Hours and the Maternity and Midwifery Festivals. And it's my pleasure to be chairing this evening. And I'm joined by four wonderful midwives. I have Annette Anderson, Lynn Tilley, Liz Pellis, and Kelly Inglis. So here they are. Welcome,
Hello.
everybody.
Thank you.
Now, of course, what
Hi.
we have to do to our guests is ask them to share a moment of the week. And I'm going to start, if I might, with Annette. Please share your moment of the week, Annette.
Yeah, thanks, Sue. And it's really nice to be here this evening. So the team will probably be bored of hearing about my workouts, but I work out regularly. And on Monday, I decided to increase my weights on arm day and was very successful. So I managed 12.5 kilos throughout a whole hour's
Oh,
class.
Wow.
So that is my moment of the week.
wow. Don't argue with Annette.
We don't.
That's wonderful. I mean, that's a really good thing to share at the beginning of the year when we all need to be looking at health and well-being. So thank you for that, Annette, and
You're
well
welcome.
done.
Thank
How
you.
about Lynn? Have
So
you
I
got
had,
a moment?
yes, I do. So I had a lovely afternoon with my 5-month-old grandson on Monday, playing with all his little toys, and had a lovely time. So that was very special.
Now, Lynn, who was playing with those toys? Let me
Me.
just check. Yes.
Showing him,
Oh, bless. Oh,
making all the noises.
that's lovely too. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
And how about Kelly?
My moment of the week is easy. It's the same nearly every week. So I sing with choirs twice a week, and so far on Monday, it just was a really great rehearsal, singing with lots of other people. And yeah, just really uplifting. It does wonders for my mood every week.
Wow. I mean, that's good because we've got someone talking about singing and choirs next week at the festival. And it's so lovely. As two of you have come up with health and well-being. So thank you for that, Kelly. We won't ask you to sing out
And
just
thank
now.
you.
Not yet. And Liz, how about your moment of the week?
So my moment of the week was actually the whole weekend because I spent it celebrating my husband's 40th. So we had a bit of a gathering, we had some nice food, and we went to see the White Lies play at the Roundhouse in London. So
Oh,
that was
wow.
pretty nice. So yeah, that was my moment of the weekend.
I think that's quite a big moment, isn't it?
Yeah, good.
Fabulous. Well, thank you very much for sharing your moments. We're going to let you have a few minutes breather while I just welcome our participants. Now, some of you will be new to the Maternity and Midwifery Hour, and you might have just discovered as you were trawling through interesting things to do on a Wednesday evening. This is an interesting thing to do on a Wednesday evening. But it's useful now. We're in our sixth year. I can't believe it. Sixth year of doing the maternity and midwifery hour because we started in the first lockdown in the UK for COVID-19. And it was really because, obviously, everyone clinical was having to focus on COVID-19 and making sure services were being provided for patients, women, and families and everything. And also within universities, students were safe, but also getting their experience in a safe way. A lot of service changes at that time. And we couldn't have study days, we couldn't have conferences or festivals. And we felt it was really, really important that midwives, student midwives, everybody working together in the maternity services, because that's our love, of course, had some way of connecting with each other and also having some self-development, professional development opportunities, and also hearing what was happening at quite a scary time. And those of you who were around at that time will know how scary it was. Sometimes it feels like a million years away, and sometimes something happens in a day and you think, wow, I can remember queuing for so long with all my mask and all my bits and everything. I think it's important to remember all of that. But we've continued. And whereas we were talking much more about COVID and the service changes, education changes, we've now moved into all sorts of things that midwives and student midwives and senior educationists are interested in within maternity. And so we've carried on, and here we are in our sixth year. And I just need to tell you, if you haven't been to the maternity hour or any of the maternity and midwifery forum before, we record everything. And the good thing about that is we don't keep it stashed away secretly. You get a connection to it. And if you get a power cut, or you have to leave what you're watching in a hurry, whatever, you can catch up, and you can always catch up. And also you can share with your colleagues and your friends if it's something of interest. And in fact, we like you to share because it's really important in terms of learning and development and practice changes and improving practice. Talking to each other, even having a little bit of a debate or an argument, actually helps put that learning in your mind and into your hands. Really important. So we're very keen on that. So if you want to find more about what we've done, the Maternity and Midwifery Forum, have a look at the Mapflix. The link is on the resources, so you can access that if you'd like to do so. Some of you will be in universities or maternity units that subscribe to Mapflix, and if so, it's very easy to just get on. And if not, you can always try and get them to subscribe. It's not so expensive. And also, the other thing, and I have to give a little health warning, once you start looking in the Mapflix catalogue and you start looking at things that are of interest, maybe for your project or for an assignment for college, or if you're doing something in practice to change, there's an awful lot there, awful lot of resources. It's a little bit addictive, and a couple of hours will go and suddenly you oh, I better catch up with what I should be doing. So that's my health warning for this evening. The other health warning is to look after yourselves. Change of weather is always a time when people seem to get a lot of colds and coughs and flu and everything. Keep yourself well. Not too much chocolate, a bit of weight training, maybe a bit of exercise, a bit of singing. Keep yourselves fit. Very important. Now, today, this is my news flash, and I'm sorry if I speak very quickly, but I'm very keen to get on to the meat of the evening. But before I do, of course, today is World Cancer Day, and the NHS Cancer Plan has been delivered. See resources. There we are. That's what it looks like on the front. And it does have an executive summary, and it's worth having a look at, this world-class service that we're going to be working towards. It's also on your resource list. Now, before you press print, just be aware there's about 79 pages. So, you know, if you want the 79 pages, do, but you can obviously save it onto your iPad or whatever, and then you can look at it at leisure. Very useful to be aware of. And yesterday, this is good news, really nice on all the platforms, was the first day of the Welsh Government baby bundles, and these are being provided in flying start areas, and they're lovely little boxes. They're sort of quite large and got really pretty decorations on, but they've got really nice goodies in of little clothes and little things for the first month or the first few weeks of a mum going home with a baby. Really nice, a really good idea. And it must help with the pennies at that point, so really good to hear. The other thing that's happening this week is on the 6th of February, the RCM Awards, Royal College of Midwives Awards, are being presented. So big congratulations to anyone who's been put forward for an award and for anyone who wins, because being put forward is a huge honour as well as winning. And that's on Friday. So I'm going to move on to the meat now. I'm almost perfect for time, a little bit, a minute early. We're going to look this evening, and some of you might know a bit about this, you might not know very much, but this is your chance to really start cementing this learning. We're looking at the NHS Resolution's early notification scheme, which is a key initiative towards achieving delivery of safer maternity care. And that's really important as we look at all these different reviews and projects looking at safety of care. This sort of is day-to-day importance. And this is providing a more rapid, caring response to families in case of severe harm. And it also obviously supports a learning culture. And this is about proactively investigating specific brain injuries at birth for looking at whether there was negligence and whether that causes the harm, and then investigating claims and just making it more smooth for families, which it has to be a good thing. So we've got the 4 marvellous midwives with us this evening, and I'm going to introduce them all together. This is going to show you real teamwork in the NHS, because these 4 midwives are going to present together, not all speaking at the same time, but they're going to show you good teamwork. So we have Annette Anderson, the head of the early notification clinical team, and her responsibilities include operational and strategic leadership of the scheme's clinical and family liaison activities, collaboration with legal teams, and engagement with NHS organisations across England. She's committed to improving safety in perinatal services, promoting shared learning and enhancing experience for families and staff following the incident and throughout the claims process. Really important role. Then we have Lynn Tilley, who joined the NHS resolution team as a National Clinical Midwifery Fellow with the early notification team. She was appointed to her current role as Safety and Learning Lead. And she also serves as the regional lead for London. She's also deeply committed to patient safety and values the opportunities her role provides to share learning with the early notification incidents. And she's also supported the establishment of the Maternity Voices Advisory Group and contributed to the development and publication of an immersive, I love this, I'm going to have to go and have a good look at this, e-learning maternity module, Maternity Insights, Closing the Loop, Learning from Harm. And we often talk about learning from mistakes, and this is really in action. Fantastic. And then we have Kelly Inglis, currently completing a Master of Business Administration through the Senior Leader Apprenticeship Programme. She's a National Midwifery Clinical Fellow with the NHS Resolutions EN team and supports work across the east of England, bringing her experience from clinical and leadership role. And finally, Elizabeth Pels is the Early Notification Family Liaison and Mediation Lead, where she leads efforts to enhance family engagement with the EN scheme. She's a trained healthcare investigator with extensive experience working with families, clinicians and other stakeholders in maternity and neonatal investigations. And I need to say all of their CVs, that's just edited highlights. Full CVs are online, so you do check them out. So welcome Annette, Liz, Kelly and Lynn. The screen is now yours and welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. So bear with me and let's hope the technology works. You should be able to see screen okay. I can see some nods. Fantastic. So evening everybody, it's great to be here with the team. We're going to talk to you about our work at NHS Resolution, and I'm just going to take you through kind of what we're going to cover as part of our talk today. Firstly, we're going to start around background and context as who we are as an organisation and why the early notification scheme was set up. Then we're going to talk about our processes and how we engage with families. There's also going to be an illustrative case story, which is going to bring the work of our team to life. It is clinically focused. We've got a clinical audience this evening, but just to caveat that it might be upsetting for you. I think, you know, we've all been midwives for a significant number of years, and when we hear real stories and cases, it can be very upsetting. So do look after yourself, and if it's something that you feel you need to step away from, then please do. And then the team are going to share some insights into learning, which is going to support you in clinical practice. So for those of you who don't know us, at NHS Resolution, we're an arm's-length body of the Department of Health and Social Care, and we used to be called the NHS Litigation Authority, but we changed our operating name a few years ago to better reflect the aims of our organisation. Now, essentially, our purpose is to provide expertise to the NHS to resolve claims fairly. As Sue has mentioned in our intros, we want to be able to share learning for improvement and also, importantly, preserve resources for patient care. And we sit within the safety and learning team within NHS Resolution. And again, it's all around sharing learning insights to help improve that patient and also staff journey. So we've got three strategic priorities. The first is about resolving claims fairly, fair resolution. We want to be able to do this for patients and also healthcare staff. And this means doing everything that we can to avoid lengthy litigation processes. And ultimately, we want to be able to avoid claims going to court. I think for us, we all have a shared understanding on this call. You know, we've all worked clinically. We continue to do so. It's thinking about what it's like being on a really busy labour ward or postnatal ward, out in the community or maybe in a home birth. So we really do have empathy within our team and within the organisation, and we don't underestimate how stressful the impact of any poor outcome, incident investigation or claims process can be. So we're here to support you as much as possible. The next priority is around data and insights. We've got a unique data set at NHS Resolution, a unique narrow lens around claims. It's about how we use that information to support sharing of learning and themes. Now, what we want to be able to do is approach this two prongs. We want to have a national influence, so we can share our learning, which can inform policy, guidance and strategy. And then taking it back to grassroots level, at trust level, it's all around how we encourage and guide individuals in trust to learn from incidents and also claims as well. And then our third pillar, which is all around maternity and neonatal. It's probably fair to say it's a really challenging time for our specialty at the moment. There's so much happening. We continue at NHS Resolution our commitment to work with key partners and organisations to improve maternity safety. So this slide is data heavy. Hopefully it presents well. The colours might not, but you can definitely read more in our annual report and accounts. This is data, but see, every day you guys are working with patients who are individuals. So every number on this slide represents an individual, a patient. For EN, a baby, and there's also going to be a wider human cost in how families are impacted when there's an incident. So these charts give an indication of the volume and value of claims. You'll see on the left, again, it might not present very well, but we've got turquoise and blue around obstetric claims. Now, just to give a caveat to that, obstetric claims do include midwifery-led care claims. We just keep it under the one umbrella to keep our coding consistent. And obstetric claims accounted for 11% of clinical claims reported by volume for that particular year, 24-25, and that excludes GP indemnity claims. What you can see, we're seeing a fairly small number of claims, but if you look on the right-hand side, thinking about the value of those claims, actually that translates into 50% of the value of all claims. So a really significant amount of money here. And then another busy slide just to highlight a couple of key areas on here, or one key area. Essentially 62%, which works out around 37.5 billion of the total clinical negligence provision, relates to maternity. So again, it's around how we can support, but also how we can preserve those resources and the finances to be translated back into maternity services and improve services as a whole, and the NHS as a whole. So why early notification? This brings us to our scheme. It's really innovative. It was launched in 2017. It aims to remould the traditional claims process to deliver better outcomes for families, and we want to be able to have earlier learning for the health service. So historically, you may be familiar with the process. So we'll use an example of maybe a baby's born with a brain injury. There may or may not be an investigation into the care. And then what would have happened historically would be a family would have to seek out a lawyer to start a claim. I think, transition to parenthood is significant enough, but to have a transition where you have a baby who's affected by a brain injury is also significant. And so that took time, years in fact. So that impacts the family, but also means that learning might not be relevant because practice has moved on. And, I can think that we've had various iterations over the years of how we interpret CTGs. So for our scheme, we've got a dual purpose. We've got the claims element. So it's about proactively investigating by clinicians, and we're midwives on this call, but we have a multidisciplinary team. We work with midwives, obstetricians and neonatologists on the team, and we work with a team of really highly skilled lawyers who form our EN legal team, and they work with our experts, and essentially what they want to be able to do is establish whether the negligence has caused harm in practice. An earlier legal investigation means families don't need to instruct lawyers. That might mean that they reduces the need for them to complain, although what we recognise is there's always different elements for a complaint, safety versus quality and also experience. So it is multifaceted. And like we said, early notification has a safety and learning element. And essentially what we want to be able to do is accelerate the legal liability investigation, avoid the adversarial processes, reduce costs, and then ensure that where possible, we can learn in real time. So I'll hand over to Lynn now.
That Annette raised in the last slide around timely compensation being paid to families where they are where they are eligible to receive that following an incident. We recognised very early in the scheme that the entry criteria was very broad. It was initially based on the Each Baby Counts criteria, and that meant as an unintended consequence that we had lots of babies referred into the scheme who were healthy and didn't have a brain injury, and therefore caused a lot of stress and distress for the families who were waiting for the outcome of an investigation, and actually there was no harm and no compensation due to be paid to them. An opportunity arose in 2019 with the rollout of the Healthcare Safety Investigation Branch, which you'll all be familiar with now as MNSI, so the Maternity and Neonatal Safety Investigation organisation, to align our entry criteria more closely with theirs so it was the same for severe brain injury. And that helped to reduce and focus our cohort quite significantly in that time. A different opportunity arose in April 2021 when we recognised there was a need for a more focused approach to our clinical triage system. And we decided that we would move towards a very clear clinical definition for that defined a hypoxic brain injury. So those are the definition on the screen there. Those babies who had definite MRI changes as a consequence of intrapartum hypoxic ischemia. And that really helped us to focus our cohort and move forward. Can I have the next slide, please, Annette? So this is quite a busy slide, and obviously there's a lot of information there, but we really thought it'd be quite helpful for us to run through the process that we follow when an incident is referred into the scheme. Now, when this slide was first developed, some of the information there has changed more recently with the introduction of the Submit a Perinatal Event Notification portal. So just thinking around that, the Trust will now report an incident into us via SPEN, which will then also, on confirmation of the MRI change, report the incident to MNSI and also to ourselves at NHS Resolution. At that point, we will acknowledge the incident being reported to us, and then we wait. And the reason for that is to allow MNSI to complete their investigation, which is very much focused on a safety lens. So looking at systems and processes that they can identify potential areas for change before we then start to move into the early notification investigation. The early notification investigation obviously has a very different lens, and that's looking to establish whether there is a potential for clinical negligence to be identified and to resolve that for the families moving forward. I'm not going to go into too much detail around the family engagement because Liz is very kindly going to bring us up to date with that later on in the presentation. But just to also say that when MNSI pass on the investigation report to the families and then after to the trusts, they will also give the families some information, a bit of a refresher about the early notification scheme and NHS Resolution as an organisation. We will then write to families and we'll introduce ourselves, and that's based on feedback from our family group, which again Liz will touch on later. And we then will receive the report from MNSI via the trust. Now that process can take around 7 months to complete, but it does depend on the completion of the MNSI report. So there is some movement with all of the timescales within this slide. We then initiate our own internal triage process, and that's undertaken by our neonatal doctors with support from the wider midwifery and family liaison team where needed. And we see in the slide that it branches off into various pathways dependent on the outcome of that triage. If the EN criteria aren't met, as in there isn't evidence of change on MRI, then the family is then informed of the fact that there will be no further action taken by the early notification scheme. And the file would be closed. But we do always signpost families at that point to legal advice and support organisations, so they do have that opportunity to pursue a claim independently should that be something that they wish they would like to do. If our criteria are then met, our multidisciplinary team will then complete our initial clinical review to identify whether there is any substandard care that may or reasonably have changed and make a difference to the outcome for the baby. Again, the pathway divides out and follows a similar route for babies where there is no evidence of substandard care or where different care wouldn't have made a difference to the outcome. Again, at that point, we follow that pathway down and would write to the family and inform them of that. But if the clinical review does indicate that there are elements of substandard care, then we contact the families to notify them of that. And that's really important because we wanted to feel that families to feel involved very early in the process so that we had regular touch points with them throughout. There's a bit of a time lag from that point while we wait for families to come back to us, because basically we're asking them for a decision as to whether they would like us to proceed with a liability investigation. So it's very much an opt-in process and not an opt-out process. The families have that opportunity, and we allow that time to recognise that they are obviously potentially looking after a potentially very sick child, or may even have suffered a bereavement and just need that additional time and space to process that time in their life. We then commence our legal investigation, and we would write to the family to confirm that that's commenced, and we also write to the trust to confirm that that's also going to be taken forward. Can I have the next slide, please? So then we move into the legal process. And again, you can see here the time is much more protracted. It takes a significant amount of time to gather all of the relevant information from various sources to then process that and have an outcome for the family. So we will commence the legal investigation, and initially that involves NHS Resolution instructing a law firm to assist in the investigation. They will then seek to obtain medical records and any relevant information from the hospital trust, and then medical legal experts are instructed to provide their expert opinion. And these are likely to be midwives, obstetricians and neonatologists, who can then give their view on the care that was received and also consider whether the legal tests were met. And that then determines whether the case goes forward for further investigation. We will then write to the family with the outcome of that investigation and let them know that we are moving into a full liability investigation. And once that's completed, we write back to tell them the outcome before the process moves into the compensation stage. I think it's important to caveat the timeframes on the slide with just to highlight that sometimes various factors such as the availability of experts can influence the time it takes to complete that, and also depending on the complexity of the incident and the claim that's being processed. So there are lapses in that time frame. And I'm going to pass it on to Liz.
Show the evolution of our early notification scheme from 2017 to the present day. We recognised very early on that once HSIB had been launched, that there was a duplication between EN and HSIB. So as Lynn mentioned earlier, we decided to wait for the HSIB, now MNSI, investigation report, and we rely on this for our triage. The EN schemes also produced a range of clinical insights. Impacted fetal head or difficult delivery of the head at caesarean section was a contributory factor in 9% of EN cases studied between 2017 and 2019. There's now funding by the Department of Health and collaboration between the Royal Colleges to address significant contributors to avoidable brain injury in childbirth, including the management of impacted fetal head at caesarean birth. This has resulted in effective training in the management techniques through the ABC programme, which was piloted and rolled out nationally the past year or so. As Lynn mentioned, the scheme has evolved over time. We initially had those very broad criteria that required trust to report any baby that was admitted to the neonatal unit for calling to us. This was really quite broad and meant that there were babies who were clinically well and that had normal MRIs who were accepted into the scheme. This potentially increased anxiety for families, especially if their baby was well at the time of discharge. And this impacts on the ability to make admissions of liability. So in April 2020, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the early notification scheme adapted their criteria in line with HSIB. And then from April 2021, we adopted those revised criteria, which focuses on identifying those babies who have a brain injury, which means focusing on the babies and families who need it the most to understand if different care would have made a difference for the outcome for their baby. Once the scheme was embedded, we recognised it was important for family voices to be heard. And in January 2021, the Maternity Voices Advisory Group was established. to provide external stakeholders, in particular families and their representatives, to have a forum which they can advise and support future service developments within the EN scheme. The group meets around 4 times a year, with workstream group meetings in between these times to advance our projects. In 2024, as part of MVAG's work, we hosted 2 parent focus groups to hear about family experience of the EN scheme and understand how we can better support families at this incredibly difficult time. And these family groups continued into 2025. We also recognised there was too much variation when trusts communicated with families. And in April 2021, we agreed to write to families directly and inform them of the scheme ourselves. We also recognised that families were not provided with enough information about the EN scheme, didn't always know their point of contact, and there was a variation in the quality and frequency of our engagement with families. In May 2023, I was appointed to lead on family liaison and mediation within the EN team and to ensure that consistent contact once a case is accepted onto our scheme. More recently, in June 2024, Laura was appointed as our family liaison officer, and we now have Moasma joining our team as our coordinator. We're committed to having earlier, more frequent and more in-depth inclusive engagement with our families who are potentially impacted by our scheme. An external evaluation of the scheme is currently being undertaken to understand its impact further, and we're hoping that the findings will be published this year. Next slide, please. So what is enhanced family engagement? So as I said, we are committed to having that earlier, more frequent and more in-depth inclusive engagement with our families. For babies born on or after the 1st of October 2023, we have an updated process of enhanced engagement with families. We communicate directly with them at multiple points throughout the EM process. If there are concerns that the care may have caused an injury to the baby, we carry out a full legal investigation and we ask for a family's permission to do this and ask them to sign a form giving us permission to access what we call additional medical records. So these are medical records from care providers other than the care provider where the baby was born. During the permission stage, we engage with families to confirm they've received our engagement, ask how they'd like to receive communication from us, answer any questions, and support them without pressure. We give families around 12 weeks to make a decision about permission. If a family decide to give permission for the legal investigation, we transfer their case to a senior case manager on the EN team, who takes over responsibility for managing progression of their case and will be their point of contact going forwards. We've also made improvements to our correspondence that we send to families, and this was following feedback. So, as part of our strategic objectives to collaborate and improve maternity outcomes and ongoing consideration for how our scheme should be developed, we work closely with our Maternity Voices Advisory Group and parents via the baby charity PEEPS HIE to improve our direct communication with families and ensure consistent contact with our family liaison team once the case is accepted. We support families who do not speak or read English by having a professional language service, and we've been able to communicate with these families in their preferred language since June 2024. When talking with families, their feedback has been incredibly positive about our enhanced engagement, appreciating the earlier, more in-depth and more frequent contacts, more information, and having a face to a name rather than a faceless organisation. In terms of our resources, we've created an EN scheme animation. This aims to be clear, concise and understandable for any families who may have experienced an incident of maternity harm and have been accepted onto the scheme, or are just seeking to understand more about what the scheme does. We hope it also acts as an important signpost for further support for our families, where they can contact our internal teams for more information if needed. And we're currently developing a second animation explaining what happens once the legal investigation has been completed, and this will be published later this year. We have family pages on our website and on the NHS Futures platform, and this includes a section of translated resources for families. We're committed to demonstrating our processes in different ways, written, visual, and we have process flowcharts, as Lynn has shown you on our previous slides, which help to demonstrate the EM process. We've updated our family letters to support our engagement with families, and these are now plain English assured and crystal marked to improve understanding further. We provide signposting to support organisations and legal organisations that can provide families with independent advice and signposting to specialist clinical negligence lawyers. We continue to listen to feedback from our families and stakeholders to inform improvements to these resources. Thank you, and over to Kelly.
Thank you, Liz. I'm going to take us now through an illustrative case story. The focus of that is going to be on fetal monitoring and CTGs, so cardiotochographs. Annette's caveat from earlier stands in that if this might be upsetting to some, and if it is, please do take a breath, step away if you need to, but hopefully it will be informative and helpful learning. So the setting for this case story is in 2017, a major acute hospital with a 27-year-old prima gravida with a low-risk pregnancy and a non-smoking mother. So the timeline for the induction of labour, which is where we'll start the story, is at 3 p.m. in the afternoon. The mother is admitted for induction of labour and the CTG is started, and at this point it is normal. The induction of labour process is explained, accepted and commenced. At 8:30 in the afternoon, contractions have started and they're regular. Pain relief is given and the mother's advised to mobilise or try a warm bath. At 11:30 p.m, contractions are stronger and they're every 3 and 10 minutes. The mother's requesting more pain relief and an examination of the cervix shows that it's 2 centimetres dilated. There's a discussion with delivery suite requesting transfer due to active labour. At 1 a.m, diamorphine is given for pain. And at 2:40 in the morning, contractions are very strong, 5 in 10, and delivery suite is contacted again and transfer occurs. At 2:55, the transfer is successful and the mother is on delivery suite. On examination on arrival, her cervix is fully dilated and the contractions are 7 in 10. At 3:10 in the morning, the CTG is commenced. At 3:30, that CTG shows abnormal features with a high baseline, no variability with decelerations, and active pushing is therefore commenced and the labour ward coordinator is informed. At 3:40, the contractions are frequent, but the CTG shows worsening features with some late decelerations. The mother's observations also show tachycardia and pushing continues. At 4 a.m, the CTG shows some loss of contact and possibly some recording of maternal heart rate. At 4:45 in the morning, the baby's head is visible with some pushes, but there's no improvement on the CTG. And at 5:08, the baby is born. Delayed cord clamping occurs for 30 seconds and the first APGAR score at 1 minute is 4. So, analysing that episode of care. So the CTG wasn't performed when the contractions started or when there was an analgesia requirement following induction of labour. The CTG was pathological from the moment that it was commenced on a delivery suite or labour ward. And there was the possibility of the maternal heart rate recording, and there wasn't use of a fetal scalp electrode considered when there was that episode of loss of contact. A fresh eye CTG analysis was not performed, and the CTG wasn't categorised during labour at all. Existing risk factors like induction of labour or anhydramnios weren't considered when interpreting the CTG. So there wasn't that holistic overview of care. Pathological CTG wasn't recognised, and therefore it wasn't escalated, which led to missed opportunities to expedite birth. So the clinical outcome. So the baby was born by spontaneous vaginal birth following induction of labour. The APGARs, I've already shared with you the first one, but subsequently were 7 and 7. The cord gas, as you can see on the screen, so the arterial was 6.95 with a base excess of -16.7, and the venous gas showed 7.01 with the same base excess. The birth weight was on the 68th centile at 3,560 grams. The baby required resuscitation at birth and subsequently therapeutic cooling. And later on, an MRI scan showed extensive hypoxic ischemic encephalopathy. So the initial investigation. So the case was referred to the early notification scheme, and the investigation included a number of recommendations to include additional training on CTG management and the recognition of an abnormal trace. The early notification clinical team review concluded that had care been different, the outcome for the baby could also have been different, and it was referred on to the EN legal team. NHS resolution instructed panel solicitors, and the panel obtained witness evidence and expert evidence from the MDT, including a midwife, an obstetrician, a neonatologist, and a neuroradiologist. Panel counsel was instructed, and the letter admitting liability was then sent to the family. Liability was admitted in full after the EN investigation, and that was due to the abnormal CTG, delivery an hour earlier had been indicated, and chronic partial hypoxic ischemic incident could have been avoided, and then the consequential permanent neurological injury as well by in turn. The letter of admission was sent 2 years and 5 months following the birth of the baby, and letters of apology were sent at the same time. Cases such as this may settle for up to or around £25 million. In terms of the outcome for the patient, the life expectancy is 56 years, with cerebral palsy level 4, microcephaly and cognitive difficulties, epilepsy, which may be poorly controlled, and a need for physiotherapy, occupational therapy, speech and language therapy, and 24-hour care, which will be lifelong. With that, I'm going to pass you back to Lynn.
Thanks, Kelly. So on the screen here, you can see some illustrative case stories that the early notification clinical team have produced. And as Annette said at the beginning, one of our key purposes is to share learning back across the system from the cases that we see reported into EN. I think it's really important that we say at this point that it's not all about, pointing fingers to say that someone's done something wrong. We also look to celebrate good practice, and we very clearly produce some good practice case stories to try and evidence that for the target audience. The case stories are available on our webpage, and we've got links in the resource pack to guide you to that. And we also provide some guidance around how they may be used either in a group or on an individual basis. And the point is that people take them away, but just reflect on these really common clinical scenarios and try to identify areas where either individual practice could be changed or team practice could be changed. Can I have the next slide, please, Annette? As we said earlier, we're involved with the development of our e-learning maternity module. We're really proud of this. It took a lot of work. It was launched in 2023. It comprises of 3 modules. So the initial module is an introduction to the law of clinical negligence, and also gives information around NHS resolution as an organisation, and also as an introduction to the early notification team. The learner's then taken into 3 immersive case stories where they're asked to make clinical decisions based on the clinical scenario and presentation at the time, with live feedback being given to them as to whether the advice or the management plan that was made was appropriate or not, or whether there was areas that could be improved to improve the outcome for the baby. There's a QR code on the bottom of the slide that can take you into the module, but again, that's provided later at the end of the slide deck for people to access. Can I have the next slide? So this infographic was produced after we published our second early notification scheme report, and that was in 2022. The report built on the findings of the first early notification report published in 2019, and really just looked to see if there were any changes that had been identified in the incidents that we saw in the scheme from that time on. You can see on the infographic that there were some key clinical themes identified from the report, which included delayed delivery, with problems often arising from delays and escalation, as we saw in the case story that Kelly presented earlier. Not surprisingly, CTG interpretation was a key feature, and then a relatively new finding was around uterine rupture in women who had opted for a VBAC, or vaginal birth after caesarean section. We also looked to see what we'd done as an organisation in response to the findings of the first report, and we'd introduced our neonatal clinical fellows as a consequence of that to identify any potential areas for learning from the resuscitation of the newborn. Can I have the next slide? And again, this page just gives us some additional links to all of the resources that we produce, and also refers to the website that Liz mentioned earlier. So it has specific pages for families and their carers, signposting them to support organisations. There's also some information for trusts or member organisations around reporting criteria, for example. And then we've also very recently published in collaboration with other organisations, learning from OAC claims. And we're really proud of that really big piece of work that was undertaken by one of our team in collaboration with others. And the QR codes are for those there on the bottom. And just a shameless plug, we've recently launched our NHS Futures workspace to stay connected, to try and keep up to date with, to update clinicians on scheme developments, and also as a platform to share our resources. But more importantly for us, it's around hearing from you so that you can engage with us as a team to raise our visibility and be more accessible to you to support where that's needed. Can I have the next slide, please, Annette? Which I believe will pass you back to you. Yes.
Working and what can be improved. Is it working? Yeah, it is. We've demonstrated that, if you look at our second EN report, that we've reduced the time for resolution of claims from what it was previously. And again, we produce lots of learning resources, as Lynn has said. And what we want to be able to do is start understanding how they're being received by you all, working clinically, and what difference they're making. So, being here on a Wednesday evening, you've watched us for nearly an hour now. So what can you do? Like Lynn said, do sign up to our NHS Futures platform to learn more about the scheme, access our resources. If there's anything that you want to talk about, we're always happy to be contacted. I'm always happy to have conversations with people, so please do reach out. Access our resources and share them with colleagues. And if you can take one thing away from a case story that might influence your practice or someone else's practice, or maybe a system or process in your unit, then that's a job well done, I'd say. And we'd also like your feedback as well. So this slide is around our feedback survey. So again, another plug. Please let us know what you thought about our talk. It would be great to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll be joining Sue for questions.
You will, and there are some coming through at the moment.
I'll stop sharing.
So thank you so much. That was really interesting, and it was also, I like the variety of the little timeline, which is quite complex, but you took us through it really nicely. And I think when you talked about the case study, you could then see how it worked so well. So thank you for that. And we've got some questions, and the first question, and I think is Elsie Gale. Hi, Elsie. She's saying, question for Kelly regarding the case story that you described. And she's sort of like most of us, she doesn't just want the ordinary questions that were asked by the team, but what was the reason for induction? I mean, we know that this is a kind of highlights. You can't do everything that was probably explored. But Elsie was saying, what was the reason for induction of labour, and are these points actually explored, as well as all the CTG, for example?
Yes, thank you for that question. So on the analysis of care, the story hints at anhydramnios. So I suspect that that's the reason in the case story, but the focus is on the CTG management, because the reason for induction in this case story didn't affect the outcome and isn't kind of a key area of learning. But yeah, I recognise it's helpful for context. So anhydramnios.
It's like being a detective. You want to know all the facets of the story, don't you?
I can relate to that, yeah.
And I think it's fab that you've got these case studies or case stories, because I think we as midwives and student midwives really learn by kind of getting involved in the stories and seeing, well, what would I have done, and what, oh, crikey, that could happen to me, especially and having positive case stories. That's fantastic. And I think having I would commend our audience to go onto that site and have a look at some of those case stories and see how you could use them, maybe with colleagues, or if you're a teacher, maybe with your group of students. Fabulous. Thank you. Now, we've got a very interesting question from Mel. And Mel says, will the closing of NHS England have any impact on your service? Good question, Mel. I don't know whether that's a net question.
We work really closely with NHS England and the Department of Health, but as we stand as NHS resolution, there is going to be no impact on the work that we do. Obviously, we're conscious of our colleagues who are going through challenges at the moment, so it's about how we support them as just peers, but we don't anticipate any changes for our organisation.
Because you're kind of like standalone.
That's right, but we do work really closely with other ALBs.
It's very disruptive, all these changes, isn't it? It's very, I mean, you have sympathy for anyone who's in the situation. So thank you for the question, Mel. That was grand. And Angela Stringfellow, hi, Angela. So, and sorry if I'm looking away, because that's where the questions are all coming through. This is a question for the whole team. How is the EN scheme data currently being used to influence national learning on intrapartum safety? And where do you see the biggest gaps in translating that learning into practice? Fab question. Thank you, Angela. Who should we start with? Should we start with Lynn?
So obviously the information, the data that we hold within the team is used in a variety of ways. So it would be used to inform the case studies. But I think more importantly, we've also worked in collaboration with other organisations, as Liz alluded to earlier, in terms of the ABC programme. One of our colleagues was very instrumental in the work around impacted fetal head, and the management of that at cesarean section. So we very much use all of the information, and we collaborate nationally with colleagues to try and share as much of that back into the system as possible. We will also feed back to trusts on an individual basis where that's required, to share learning from individual or an analysis of the cases that are reported by an individual organisation.
I was wondering, does that input into universities as well?
So the e-learning module was shared with all of the universities, and we've also linked in with the Royal Colleges, the Royal College of Obstetricians, and also the Royal College of Midwives, to share the resource. So yes, we do. It is very much, we work obviously in isolation to a point, but we try and work across the system as much as we possibly can and try to influence change at every opportunity, really.
Fabulous. Does anyone else want to add anything to Lynn?
Yeah, I can add to what Lynn said. Again, it's about how we influence policy and strategy as well. So using our data and insights, like Lynn said, we've been able to do that really well for the ABC programme and impacted fetal head. Other areas is in relation to NICE guidance. So it's how we translate what we're seeing in our cases to inform updates and developments to NICE guidance, and we've done that for hyponatremia, maternal hyponatremia.
Wow, thank you. And another question that I noticed, you had OAC on one of your clips, and Neil asks a question: what is the scope of maternal birth trauma in your work, or is it just the baby? Well, just the baby. And I was actually interested in this because obviously for women who go through an experience and maybe have damage afterwards, they might have the same need to have some sort of redress. Is that funneled through you the same way?
So we do focus on babies with brain injuries, but what we don't do is separate mum from the baby. So where we have maybe risk of a maternal claim, for example, excuse me, then we would be able to manage that. And we've got early notification. We also have our routine claims management service as well. So they continue to manage cases and claims that don't fall within early notifications remit. And we work really closely together in the organisation to join up safety and learning and claims as a whole.
Wow. So if a mum had, say she had an OAC damage or something, because that is not uncommon, sadly, would she just be able to call you direct and get some sort of guidance as to where to go and how to go about dealing with it?
Yeah, we always receive phone calls from patients, parents, mums asking for advice. I think sometimes if you have an isolated, incidents maybe of where there's a tear, some people may want to seek out a solicitor. But where we have the knowledge that there has been a baby with a brain injury and maybe mum has been affected as well, then we try and see if we can manage the claim in parallel.
Fabulous. I mean, because I think that as you were talking, what you think of is all these reports that come out to say nobody listened to me and I didn't know what to do and nobody told me anything. And it's something I'm just thinking this is a fantastic resource for women and their families
Mhm.
where they're feeling like that to be sort of guided. So it's lovely to hear. Thank you for that. And we've got Ogchen. Sorry if I pronounced that wrongly, again. She says, 2 years is a long time for admitting fault. Is there any plans to reduce this? Is there a different pathway for stillbirth and neonatal deaths?
Yeah,
That might be
great question. I
Our
agree.
audience are
I think,
fabulous.
yeah, great, all great questions. So I think when we compare, and it isn't an excuse, but when we compare what we're doing now compared to the traditional process, we've definitely improved the timescale. So you could look around 7 years previously and in excess of that, which again is significant. Do appreciate that, yes, 2 years is also a significant amount of time. And for an individual family, that is a long time. We do have systems that the legal team manage to where we feel that there may be admissions of liability to make interim payments. So there is that option. I think as part of the evaluation, it's always important for us to challenge ourselves into thinking about, can we do anything differently? So that's what we've got lots of ideas of what we want to do, but it's also waiting for our evaluation to see, okay, where can we do things differently and how can we continue to make a difference and ultimately evolve the scheme going forward.
I must admit, when you were saying about 2 years, I thought actually well, it sounds terrible, doesn't it? But if you're a mum who's had an event like that, and I think Kelly and Elizabeth described that really well. I think because if you've got some other things going on, you might need a longer time. It doesn't feel like such a long time. So I think, we need to take that into account as well. That's fantastic. And
And
I'm
can I
just trying.
just say
Yeah,
something?
sorry.
So I think so that's okay. So every claim will be different, I think, as
Yeah.
Kelly had said. So that's an average time scale. So we take every situation, individually and provide that kind of individual holistic approach for managing the claim. Was there another part to that question as well? Was there something else?
No, it's about, is there a different pathway for stillbirth and neonatal
Yeah, so
death?
babies who are sadly stillborn and neonatal death. So we do have include some babies who die within early notification. There is another pathway via our claims management team, also known as CNST as well.
Fabulous. Did anyone want to add anything else?
Could I just say
Please do, Liz.
just from a family engagement perspective, really, what we're really trying to do is engage with our families earlier and give them sort of information as and when they need it so that they're kept updated and hopefully not having to come back and chase information themselves. So that's been a really big thing for us sort of in the last sort of year or two, is really trying to be proactive about that updating during the early notification scheme investigation. Yeah,
And I think that comes out over really clearly. Actually, it does fit because even on the timeline, it was very much addressed to parents and mums and parents, which is very strong because it is a very complicated process. And even the language, I was sort of jotting down the MVAG, which is kind of everyday to us, but for users, it's not. All these
absolutely.
acronyms we use, we kind of throw them around. It's like a different world, isn't it, for them?
Yeah, and that's why it was really important for us to try and simplify our resources, our engagement with families, and families can have as much or as little information as they would like, but we're trying to make sure that for the most part it's in a kind of, it's either written or it's audio or it's visual, or we can have a telephone call or a Teams call and provide that information. So different families will want information presented to them in different ways. So it's trying to accommodate that as best as we can. And recognizing that some families will not want information straight away. They might want it further down the line, and being flexible for that.
That's grand. Now, I always say, and I said to the team this evening, this hour is the fastest in the week. And sadly, we've come to the end. But if you have any queries, I know the team are very happy to be contacted. And also have a look at all those different QR codes and choose and get to know a little bit more. And also, don't forget to do the little survey and say what you thought. And you might say, oh, well, it's fantastic, which it was, but you might say, oh, I'd have liked more information about this, or I'd like more information about that. It might mean that we just need to bring our friends back, maybe
Yes, please.
next session. You know, this sort of thing is really important that we know about, so that we can guide mums and partners and families to these resources, so we're not keeping anything hidden, and we're making sure when things go wrong, we really learn from it, and we help parents, and we're open and transparent about what we do. It's horrible when things go wrong, and it's painful for us as well as for parents, but by helping them, that kind of starts the healing for us as well, I think. So thank you so much to Annette, to Lynn, Kelly and Liz for coming this evening. Now, I've just got a few notes to make. Okay, I also have to thank Angelo, who's in the background making sure everything's working, so that you'll get this as a podcast 6 o'clock in the morning. This might be good for Annette with her weight training, actually. 6 o'clock in the morning as a podcast, or it'll come out next week with the newsletter on Thursday. Now, if you haven't subscribed to the Maternity Midwifery newsletter, good to do so, because you get a little chunk of information, current stuff, which is very midwifery and maternity related. Also, any links or anything interesting to you, we include on that. So it's useful to be part of that. And thank you also to Paul, who's been putting through the questions to me. And also, I have to say, and thank you for your thank yous. You've been a fantastic audience this evening, so thank you for that. Now, remember, for any of you who haven't signed up, the Maternity and Midwifery Festival London is in London on the 11th of February. January's gone, thank goodness, in February. And next week, we're going to have some highlights from the festival for you, which is fantastic. So a big thank you to everybody for coming this evening. Thank you to our wonderful speakers, and thank you to you. And also another underlining, take care of yourselves so we can see you next week. Same place, same time. Take care. Bye.
Welcome to Matflix, video streaming from maternity experts. My name is Dr. Jenny Hall. I am the box sets curator at Matflix, a fellow of the Royal College of Midwives and a former editor of The Practicing Midwife. At Matflix, we bring together videos of talks from top maternity experts into box sets to support your continued professional development, study and revalidation. It is a perfect study accompaniment for midwives, maternity professionals, midwifery students and anyone thinking about a career in the maternity services. My job is bringing together the latest thinking area by area so you do not have to. Not only do you get the video of brilliant talks and relevant content in thematic box sets, you also get access to the audio version so you can listen on the commute or while you walk the